everybody, and welcome to Generally Speaking, the podcast that bridges the worlds of pop culture and personal development. I am your host, Jennifer Snook. I hope everything has been going really well in your world. Here is what's been happening in mine. So the couch arrived, you guys. The couch that we talked about last week showed up from Wayfair. I was so nervous about ordering from Wayfair, but I have to tell you, this couch exceeded my every expectation, you guys. I ordered it. It was here in 3 days, and not only did it arrive in 3 days, but it showed up looking exactly like the picture and honestly being such a comfortable couch, which was, the big sticking point. Everybody's like, oh, none of those couches are comfortable. But I really think the key is that you just have to check out the customer ratings and really read them and dive into those because they give you all the feedback that you need. So anyway, it is so perfect in that space. And I know last week we said it was pink, but it's not really pink. It's more of a blush. And let me tell you, it is beautiful. Speaking of beautiful, do you know who I ran into this week that I thought was so beautiful and such a nice guy? He was just so warm and welcoming and just a complete peach. Was John Hill, Andy Cohen's ex-boyfriend that's often on Watch What Happens Live. John came into the salon this week and I recognized him and we had a really nice exchange, and he is just so warm and wonderful, and I just can't wait for him to come back. Speaking of coming back, you know who hasn't been back to another football game is Taylor Swift. She hasn't been to one of Travis's games in 2 weeks now. So the big question is she just otherwise occupied, or is there trouble in paradise? So I don't know. I get not being there 1 week. I mean, she's Taylor Swift. I get her not being there 2 weeks, but it is something to pay attention to. You know what else we need to be paying attention to, you guys? I talked last week about the fact that Louis' company went into bankruptcy, Chapter 11, his digital media solutions. Well, now that company that he was associated with, the one that had that big party that nobody got paid for, Venivia, the Swiss chapter of Venivia, which I think that's just basically, they call it the Swiss chapter, but it's based in Switzerland. So that's just Venivia, I think. Anyway, they too have filed for bankruptcy. So that is 2 companies that Louis is associated with. In the dumps. Speaking of the dumps, our girl Kim Richards is in big trouble again. And now Kyle's getting involved and having her evicted from the home that Kyle owns, that Kim lives in, because Kim has clearly fallen off the wagon again and she is in a really bad spot. And so, of course, what a horrible position for Kyle to be in. You know what I mean? She wants to help her sister, but she can't very well just provide a drug den for her to just keep doing drugs in. So Kyle was just spotted on Friday down at the Van Nuys courthouse trying to get papers to get her sister evicted. So, I mean, all the love to that family. That's such a rough situation. Speaking of a rough situation, you guys, we lost 2 legends this week. We lost Dame Maggie Smith, who is just a screen icon and has been for years. And then we lost the amazing Chris Christopherson, the musician and movie star himself, and just overall babe, quite frankly. He was such a wonderful guy. I just loved him. And every time he opened his mouth, he was just so gentle and considerate. He was a very beautiful blend of a man. I'm telling you, he had it all. He really did. I just love that guy. In other news, and as I'm sure you've already heard, Ryan is suing Tamra for slander. So yes, it is kind of like deja vu all over again, because we know that her and Shannon went through something like this with Jim Bellino. And now Ryan has even hired Jim Bellino's attorney. So there's a continuity here. So it's not like that guy doesn't know what he's doing, because Tamra's already had to pay up big bucks for doing the same thing just a few years ago. So it's really an unfortunate situation. And now, does that mean that this guy is just not a shady character? No, it doesn't. That Ryan, in my personal opinion, is a shady character. And we all know that he cooperated with the feds and gave them statements, I believe, in exchange for immunity. So basically, he's off the hook. She can't really get him for anything because he gave up the bigger players, right? So while he can get off on the technicality of the fact that he wasn't rated, that doesn't mean that he didn't do anything wrong. Should Tamra be more careful with her mouth? Absolutely. But also, in the next breath, you guys, how do we handle this? And what does this do to the whole reality show world if you're not allowed to say something about someone? Like, where do you draw the line exactly? Because now Kelly Dodd has entered the chat and she wants to get Gretchen together along with Vicky, and she wants the 3 of them to create a class action lawsuit against Tamra for basically talking shit or saying things about them that they say aren't true. But I'm sure there's been plenty of things said about Tamra that aren't true, right? You don't see her suing people. You just see her screaming at them. But there's no doubt that Tamra is rattled. I mean, Tamra is, I would venture to say, terrified because she doesn't want to go through what she went through with Jim again. And the other night when they left Watch What Happens Live, they were walking around and I think she realized that she had said too much and they went on Instagram Live or something and they made that video talking about the fact that she misspoke. And then as all of this momentum built around Ryan suing her, then she went out the next day and issued a more formal public apology, which says, as I mentioned on my IG story yesterday, I would like to apologize for and correct the record on a misstatement I made on Watch What Happens Live on Thursday about Ryan Boyajian. I think that's how you say it. I have no reason to believe that Ryan has stolen any money. I misspoke in tying Ryan to the actions of others. I meant to say my company makes more money than what was stolen from the Dodger player. Unfortunately, I misspoke on live television. While Ryan and I have had ongoing issues, I do apologize to him for the mistake and wish to make clear that my statement was made in error. I sincerely apologize, Tamra Judge. And what we're seeing here is complete damage control because she just doesn't want to go through that again. And quite frankly, I do not blame her. And now we have new reporting on Shannon Beador by Joel Cambuster, who is hosting that new show that Shannon is currently filming. I think they're in Mexico, and she's there with Luann, she's there with Ashley Darby, and she's there with Giselle Bryant. And they're filming a new show for Peacock. This guy is hosting, and after they finished rapping, he went on to lay it all out there. This guy let his feelings about Shannon be known. Joel had a whole lot to say about Shannon, and it went something like this. Just because you're a pathetic drunk on a reality television show best known for your string of failed relationships and DUI does not make you a star and does not give you license to treat the people you work with like they are subhuman. Period. They will make me delete this, but DM me if you'd like to see some videos. Besos. But honestly, I'm not surprised. I mean, Shannon is a funny chick. She has a good sense of humor, but there's no doubt that she's an elitist. She grew up very privileged. She went to cotillion, you guys, where, you come out and you have your formal coming out to society. She even had her daughters do it. Shannon has a very classist attitude. There's no getting around it. So honestly, I'm not at all surprised by what he has to say about her. Okay, now it's time for our reality check. And speaking of Shannon, we're gonna start in the OC. The show opens with Emily, Gina, and Tamra at that coffee shop relitigating everything that went over the night before at that party and everything that led up to that confrontation about the clothes. They dove into that, and then afterwards they touched on Alexis and her very strange behavior, which, let's face it, was very strange, especially when she said a bunch of stuff is going to come out tomorrow, but Johnny has had enough because he's lost everything. But can someone please explain to me what in the hell John Jansen has lost? What exactly has he lost as a result of his relationship with Shannon Beador? I don't see how he's lost anything. I think it's been a net gain for that guy. I really do. Then Terry Dubrow goes in for a nose job so he can start breathing and Heather can start sleeping. While they're doing all the pre-op, Heather's telling him about the night before and how she got into it with the girls. And Terry goes on to tell her that she has a process for getting over things once she has a challenge with a friend. She likes to relitigate it and then relitigate it again and then relitigate it again. Ad nauseum, he says. And Heather is not happy about this at all. And you can hear her chastising him for chastising her on camera. And there was real tension there. And truthfully, it was the most non-produced shit we've seen in a long time. Then they hook Terry up to a bunch of machines so they can have a look at his heart to make sure everything's clear for the surgery. They give Terry the green light, and that gives Terry a heart on. And then we go shopping with Jen and Guido the killer pimp, aka Ryan. Don't sue me, Ryan. I know you're not a pimp, I think. Jen says that Ryan's style is Ryan's style and that there is no influencing it. She says he does his own thing. He always does his own thing. And then she goes on to tell us that he tailors everything. all the way down to his underwear. His underwear, have you ever heard of that? Tell me if you've ever known anyone that tailors their underwear. Please, I need to know. Leave it in the comments. Then we're at Tamra and Eddie's, where Tamra's complaining that Eddie can't keep the kitchen clean. She tells him that her and Jen are moving forward, and because of it, it would be nice if maybe he could try to move forward with Ryan. Eddie says that he loves Jen and has a lot of respect for her, but he has no interest in having anything to do with Ryan. Back at the clothing store, Jen is telling Ryan that she has a lot of respect for Eddie, and her and Tamra are trying to move forward, and she would really love it if he would go out of his way and make an effort with Eddie. They keep cutting between the two couples who are basically having the same conversation just about each other. Tamra is talking about how Ryan went on a bunch of podcasts and talked a bunch of shit. And then we cut to Ryan talking about the fact that Eddie just isn't a dude. He's just not. He's not a dude. Ryan says that the reason that he did that podcast is so people could know his truth and not just Tamra's twisted reality. In the end, Ryan says that he's willing to have a conversation with Eddie, but over in Tamra's kitchen, Eddie says, no way, no how. Eddie says he loves Jen, but he wants nothing to do with her guy because her guy is a scumbag. His words, not mine. Over at Shannon's house, she has a FaceTime with her daughter Adelaide. She tells her all about her tour, and then she dives into all the drama with John and the fact that he's holding these tapes over her head as leverage. Shannon says in confessional that she really feels like she's hit rock bottom, and then in between tears says that it feels like John's trying to push her down even farther and make her suffer even more. And then the show stops and takes a hard turn toward Tamra, who picks up her phone and sees the big headline from People magazine that John Jansen is suing Shannon Bedore for $75,000. Tamra instantly picks up her phone. She calls Shannon. Shannon didn't answer, but a few minutes later, Butt dialed Tamra back, and Tamra sat there listening to her sobbing and crying and talking about, all this trauma that's going on with her. And then when Shannon realizes that there's someone on the other line, she picks up the phone and says, hello, hello. And then Tamra hangs up and then picks up the phone again and calls Heather and says, did you hear the news? Heather goes on to say, no, what news? And Tamra tells her all about it. And Heather is completely confused. She goes on to say that, I'm really not sure what John is doing this, or for that matter, what John and Alexis are doing. Was there not any way to resolve this? In confessional, Heather says, John has historically said that he doesn't like the spotlight. And this is counterintuitive to that. And hello, to say the very least. Then we're at Katie's house where she's giving her husband the lowdown on everyone who's coming to her party. She says that Gina's not coming because she's with her kids this weekend. She said she didn't invite Shannon because she doesn't want her to feel left out, being the only single person. And then we know that her and Heather have a little residual beef, plus Heather is busy handling Terry and his nose job to help him breathe, and according to Heather, look a little more like George Clooney. Then we're over at Gina's, and her ex and his new chick come over to drop some stuff off and have a meatball. And then we dive into the fact that they are about to get married and how Gina is so happy for them and the whole situation. And that really highlights the fact that she doesn't have that same situation with Travis's ex, because that wicked witch is apparently the reason why they're living in this strange dual house situation. But I'm going to say it today, like I've been saying it for the last few weeks, few months now. I really even more now believe that this whole thing was a plot just to keep Gina on the show. I really do not think that any of this is real. I think that they staged the whole thing, the moving out, because riddle me this. If Travis's ex was so bad and such a, monster, wouldn't we have heard from her by now? Because I feel like every time there's some crazy ex, they always come to the surface eventually. And we haven't seen some crazy ex come forward and say anything about Gina or really create trouble. So I just really feel like this is all for the cameras. You've got her ex even in the scene saying, we don't want him to go. We don't want him to go. We love Travis. Because if she were having all of these troubles historically with his ex, why would she have gone into a real estate business? Why would it have been Gina and Travis? Because once you create all those billboards and all that stationery and all that merch to really promote your business, that's like a huge investment. You wouldn't go into something like that if you're really having so many troubles behind the scenes with the ex-wife. It just doesn't make sense to me. Then we're over at Katie's casa for the big dinner. All the couples arrive. They meet Matt, who in turn offers to make them a drink. Tamra orders a dirty. Meanwhile, Eddie ordered a very deliberate sparkling water. Then Jen and Ryan walk in, and Ryan kind of beelined over to Eddie. And Eddie greeted him warmly at first, but then backed off when Ryan asked him if he wanted a hug. Then Ryan tried to go in again and said, "Hey, it's really great to see you." And as Eddie just kind of steps away, Ryan says, "Are you gonna hide?" And Eddie says, "No, I just have nothing to say to you." And this testosterone flare made Emily hot. Meanwhile, Katie was just worried about her $80 wine glasses getting broken. While Tamra was fixing Emily's face, she asked her if she had heard what Eddie said to Ryan. And she said yes, but I don't blame him at all, which prompted Tamra to call him a little bitch, and the producers to flash back to when Kelly Dodd called Emily's husband Shane a little bitch. And I have to say that whole scene really made me miss Kelly Dodd. And I know she's a lot, but she is great TV, and you just can't get around it. As Jen and Ryan were walking to their seats at the table, Jen asked Ryan, "Did Eddie not say hello to you?" And he says, "No, he didn't want to talk to me. He didn't want to give me a hug. Guy's a clown, baby bitch." Outside on the patio, Katie's husband, Matt, asks Ryan what he does. And that was epic, you guys. Did you see that? Sorry, nobody can tell me that this isn't a shady character, because when somebody asks you what you do, it doesn't take 47 different things to describe it. And honestly, it was so awkward for everyone, especially Ryan. You'd think if that guy was smart, he would have kind of dialed it down and boiled it down, because that's kind of a question that people get asked, right? What do you do? It shouldn't take you 5 minutes to explain it. He needs to just dial it down to the word developer, because that's the word I heard the most. Ryan, hey Ryan, call yourself a developer. We don't know what you develop, but you, my friend, are a developer. Then Emily asked Tamra to go and get her another drink, and as Tamra's holding up Emily's drink to be filled up, she's holding her drink in the other hand, and that one starts spilling. So Tamra just instantly looks like a drunk because she's firstly double-fisted and spilling one of the drinks. Then everybody takes their seat at the table, and while Tamra's making small talk with Matt, she tells him that she saw Katie's butthole. And it is very clear that this is not Matt's usual vibe, but he handled it like a pro. Then we cut back to Shannon's house, where she says that she's sick to her stomach, that all of the girls are gone, she's lonely, and she only has Archie, which feels like a lot of pressure for that poor dog, but thank God she's got him. Then Tamra addresses the table and says, "Can we talk about the elephant in the room?" And Emily says, "What? Eddie and Ryan?" Then Tamra turns to Ryan and says, "You went on that podcast and talked all kinds of mad shit. You said all kinds of horrible things about me and about me as a mother. And you said terrible things about Eddie as a businessman." And Ryan says, "Listen, I felt very validated in everything I said." And at the same time, Jen pipes up and says, "No, he didn't. He never said anything about Eddie. He never talked shit about Eddie as a businessman." And Tamra said, "Yes, he did." And then they flash back to Ryan actually saying it and proving Tamra's point. Ryan keeps denying it and says, "I only went on one podcast, and quite frankly, I was a friend to Eddie until he started talking shit about me." And then Tamra says, "How exactly did he talk shit about you?" And then Ryan says, "Last year in my backyard, Eddie said that one of my friends came up to him and told him to watch out because I like to screw married women." And Eddie very calmly replies with, "That's exactly what happened." Ryan comes back with, "That didn't happen." And Tamra and Eddie both say, "That absolutely happened." Then Eddie looks at him and says, "Why would I even make that up? Why would I make anything like that up?" And then to camera, Tamra says, "We all know that Ryan likes to screw married women. I could give you a whole list of them. And P.S., Jen was married when he started screwing her." Then Ryan, in this weird display, says, "Let's just pretend that happened," which it didn't. But if it did, if that were me, if some guy came up and told me that, I would beeline right over to that guy and sit him down and say, "Hey, listen, we have a problem." And Eddie looked at him and says, "Well, I wouldn't do that because I'm not threatened by you." Ryan says, "You never brought it up to me." And Eddie says, "Because like I told you, you are no threat to me. And I can promise you that you would never have my wife. And that's why it's not a big deal." And to that, I said, "Yes, Eddie, yes." It's so true. I mean, why would you sit there and engage with someone like that? If you know what you know, I say it all the time, it doesn't matter what other people think. And then the poster child for fragile masculinity just keeps going and says, "You'd think that as a man, you would have come up to me and say, 'Bro, are you saying disrespectful things about my wife?'" And Eddie goes, "For what?" And Tamra says, "Why would he? He's not a little bitch." And Eddie says, "I already told you, I have nothing to prove." Then Jen looks at Tamra and says, "Why are you doing this? But I couldn't even really understand that question because the only reason why Tamra's saying that is because of what Ryan is saying to her. He said that didn't happen when clearly it did. Then Tamra brings up her entire laundry list of complaints against Ryan, including the dick pic that Ryan posted of her son from 20 years ago, which Ryan just recently reposted. Then Tamra looks at him and says, the fact that you're coming after my kids makes you a bitch. You know what? You are a bitch. And then Jen looks at Eddie and says, how can you let this happen? How can you let her talk like this? And Eddie says, I'm not her keeper. Then Ryan looks at Tamra and says, are you really speaking like this? A woman of your age, are you really speaking like this? And Tamra says, my age, huh? So now you're age shaming me? And he says, no, I'm not. I'm just wondering what kind of a person speaks like this at an adult dinner table. And then right on cue, they cut back to just a little earlier when Ryan was calling Eddie a clown and a baby bitch. And Tamra goes, oh yes, Ryan, I know you've got it all together. You're just perfect. How's the FBI working for you? And before Tamra can even finish her sentence, Eddie takes her face in his hands, turns it away from Ryan, and tells her to stop. Please stop. It's not worth it. Please stop. Then Jen, with this crazy voice, says, FBI? What are you talking about, Tamra? In confessional, Katie says, I don't know what that means. I'm not in the mob. And then Tamra, looking beautiful in confessional, says, I've known for 6 months that Ryan was raided by the FBI, and Jen knows all about it. And then Emily in confessional basically says the same thing. She says that she knows that Ryan goes to Vegas a lot with the guy that got busted. And she goes on to note that there can only be so much smoke before there's fire. And Jen turns to Eddie again and says, listen, I really hate this coming between the two of us because I've had massive respect for you forever. And at that moment, Tamra stands up and says, where's my purse? I am done. As Tamra gets up and walks away, Ryan says, Tamra takes anyone that's happy and tries to railroad them because she's miserable. Her marriage is a sham. Eddie is soft. He's unemployed. And when others are doing well and real love is being shown, she can't handle it because it's everything that she doesn't have. And if we're to break that down, he actually says her marriage is a sham. I mean, couldn't she sue him for that? Her marriage is a sham. She could say that that's damaging, right? Eddie is soft. He's unemployed. He's not unemployed. They clearly have a very successful business. So, I mean, this guy is saying all kinds of crazy stuff too. So maybe there'll be a countersuit. Then they cut to Tamra, who says, I know that he has done some really shady things in the past, but I don't think anyone is prepared to see who the real Ryan is. Then poor Tamra steps out of the gate and falls on her face. But again, I really don't think it was because she was drunk. I just think she didn't see the step. I'm not saying she wasn't buzzed. I'm not saying she didn't drink too much. I'm just saying that everyone's making it out like she was just so plastered and so drunk. But she seemed very clear to me. She was completely coherent. She was articulate. She was not slurring her words. She didn't get physical. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe now Tamra is wanting people to think that she was drunk, so they think that maybe she wasn't in her right mind when she said that. I don't know, but I do know that I'm excited for next week. Okay, you guys, moving over to Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City starts out, this was so weird. Salt Lake City starts out with Bronwyn and Lisa cruising in the car, and Bronwyn telling her that the night before was just so stressful that she couldn't even eat. The two of them are in full shit-talking mode when the phone rings, and then Lisa asks Bronwyn to zip it so she can answer the phone. And then when she does, it's Angie on the phone asking if she can get together with her to talk about things. Over at Angie's house, she's telling her husband about what went down at that dinner, and he tells her that what Lisa's doing is using intimidation tactics, and she can't let her do that to her. And then Angie, in her very strange voice, says, I need to tell her how I feel. I need to continue to be more honest with her and see where it goes. And he says, sounds great. Then we're in the kitchen with Mary Cosby and her son, and she's telling him about how someone at the party called her poor. And Mary says, don't ever call me poor, because that's like being ungrateful to God. Mary's son Robert still lives at home. He's not working and asks his mom for money. But Mary says that it's because he's been very sheltered, and she feels like that's her fault, so she's okay with it for now. Now we're back in the car with Bronwyn and Lisa. Now they cruise over and they pick up Heather Gay. And you would think that they're all going somewhere for the day and maybe just stopping at Wendy's to get food, but no, Wendy's was the entire trip. So the three of them are now in the car and they're recapping the previous night. And Heather tells them that she woke up in the middle of the night wondering if maybe they actually all ganged up on Whitney. Bronwyn says, no, I don't think it was a gang up on Whitney because the only one that was actually ratcheting it up was Whitney herself. And that was the moment where Heather started side-eyeing Bronwyn and said, I've seen this energy before, and I think it's suspect when people are so critical and so harsh about people that they've only known for 10 minutes. All of this while they're going to Wendy's, ordering French fries and Frosties, and driving back. Clearly, this was about some type of product placement situation, and I think it's Lisa Barlow that has a gig with those guys. Then Meredith and Seth meet up at a cooking class. They're trying to spend more time together because recently he's been working away more often than usual, and the two of them are trying to connect. So they go to make shashuska. Is that how you say it? I always screw that word up. Shashuska, or however you say it, is an Israeli dish. And this leads into the conversation about Meredith reclaiming her Jewish heritage. Meredith goes on to say that previously it wasn't that important to her, but recently, after everything that's been going on, she really feels like she wants to be more connected to it. And Seth could not be more overjoyed. He is genuinely so moved by her desire to get bat mitzvahed that it brings him to tears. And then he goes on to tell her that he cannot wait to talk dirty to her in Hebrew. And I gotta say, I think he's a sweet guy. Then we meet up for that face-to-face between Angie and Lisa, and it is uncomfortable from the jump. After a very awkward silence, Angie says, thank you for meeting me, Lisa. I didn't sleep well last night. I don't know how you slept, but Lisa, you know, I left there and it didn't hit me till I got home just how much it felt like a gang up. And Lisa says, you took the conversation that we had and brought it back to Whitney. And you and I are supposed to have conversations that are meant just for us. And Angie says, of course. And I feel like I'm trying to do everything that I can to prove that I'm a good friend to you. And Lisa's like, stop trying and just be one. Lisa in confessional says, if she could just stop trying to get me to think like her and try listening to me with the intent to understand, we could get a whole lot farther. And then Lisa tells her, listen, just because I'm strong doesn't mean that I don't deserve to be heard. And Angie says, yes, but you have a strong personality and you might say it one way, but people take it another way because there's people in this group that you might intimidate. And Lisa comes back with, listen, this is exactly who I am. I'm in my mid-40s. And then she tops it off with, listen, if everyone wants to think that I'm a self-centered villain, then let them think that I'm a self-centered villain. At this point, I honestly don't care. And now it's time for me to go. And she went. Then we're over at Bronwyn's house, which basically looks like a high-class circus. While we're there, we meet Bronwyn's husband, Ted, who was a retired high-tech guy who now does private equity. And I gotta say, he must really love her, honestly, to tolerate that taste. Then Heather and Whitney meet up for a crystal journey. They tiptoe around the subject, but eventually they do start talking about the dinner, and Whitney expresses the fact that she did feel ganged up on, and she really thought that Heather could have stood up for her more. Heather says, you're right, I should have, and I'm sorry. And then Whitney says, listen, before this all went down, I was planning a really fun trip for everyone to take. She tells her that she's already got Bronwyn on board, that she met up with her and she was super supportive, which really confused Heather given the fact that she had just gone to Wendy's with Bronwyn and during that little excursion said exactly the opposite. Heather goes on to tell Whitney that she was actually planning some kind of team building activity and that maybe she can use that team building activity to create some momentum for her trip to see Trixie in Milwaukee. Then we're in Meredith's kitchen with her and her two kids, and she's acting like she's Bill Nye the Science Guy trying to perfect her bath bombs. And it was there that she dropped the bomb on her kids that she's actually going to be bat mitzvahed. The kids were curious at first and poked a little light fun, but ultimately super supportive about what their mom wants to do. Then Heather goes to play pickleball with Brittany. She's that other bad Mormon. She's been divorced twice, but now she's in a relationship with one of the Osmond offspring, but he isn't willing to put a label on their relationship unless that label is best friend. Her and Heather talk about sacrificing their kids for a man, and Heather goes on to explain that Mormonism really perpetuates the belief that your romantic relationship is the most important relationship of all. Then we go to Lunatic Fringe with Bronwyn. Lunatic Fringe is Angie's salon, and Bronwyn is there to get her hair done and have a convo with Angie, namely about Lisa. Angie tells Bronwyn that she loved meeting her husband and she thinks that he's a big teddy bear, which Bronwyn was very happy to hear. Then Bronwyn tells Angie that she thinks that Brittany is actually all over the place, and that Angie tells her that she actually went bowling with Brittany the day before and that Brittany brought up that fur heart more than once. Bronwyn says that she really doesn't like to talk about other women, but she's not even sure that Brittany can spell YSL. And then she goes on to say that women like Brittany are the reason why she fails to have strong female friendships. Then we're at a ropes course for Heather's team building event, and all of the women agree to participate except Meredith, who says that she has tennis elbow from churning butter. Whitney goes on to say that doing this ropes course feels like she's giving a hand job, which prompts the producers to ask her when she's ever given a hand job with her hand above her head. Whitney goes, I don't know, maybe under a desk. I've done it a couple of times. They all survive the ropes course, and then they head to the food truck that Heather hired. They all put in their food orders, but Mary Cosby orders a quesadilla. Then out of nowhere, new Brittany stands up and tries to get everyone's attention. Excuse me. And then she says, for those of you who know, my relationship drama has been on again, off again. But last night, Jared took me out and we bought matching jewelry at Louis Vuitton. Then he asked me to be his girlfriend. And he made us IG official. And that might not sound like a big deal, but it's actually a huge deal because he's never posted about anyone, ever. Hello? You guys went out and bought matching Louis Vuitton jewelry? Like, what kind of jewelry? Did he buy it? Did you go Dutch? What does that mean? What was that entire presentation? It was the strangest thing I've ever seen. And then Bronwyn pipes up and says, but the Instagram I saw said best friend, and you guys were at Costco. Everybody pulls up their phone and looks at the post. Lisa holds it up and says, is this the post? You're not official, Brittany. You're not official. And Brittany goes, I just want you guys to be happy for me. And then with perfect timing, Mary Cosby pipes up and says, I'm just trying to figure out, why do we care? And Brittany fires back with, Mary, rude. Then Lisa pipes up again and says, Brittany, I would be worried about this. I feel like Jared's working you over a little bit. And Brittany says, do you really? And then Whitney chimes in and says, I've been to dinner with you guys, and honestly, he feels like a politician. I feel like you're really into him, but he just cares about you. Brittany keeps talking, and then she eventually gets emotional. And that's when Heather interjected and said, listen, you guys, there's a lot going on in Brittany's life right now with her kids and with her ex. She's really been having some problems, but she's trying to repair things with her nuclear family. Then Lisa asks, what are the problems with your nuclear family? And Brittany says, oh, they're huge ones because neither one of my daughters will talk to me. And at this point, everybody's asking, why? Brittany says, it's really complicated and it's really personal. And Mary goes, it's really personal, but you just offered up all that stuff about your boyfriend? You need to do some soul searching, babe. And Bronwyn says, Mary's not wrong. And Brittany says, I'm kind. And Mary snaps back, if you're so kind, why can't you make amends with your children? And then to camera, Mary confesses that this is a real trigger for her because it reminds her of her mom, who used to do the same thing and choose her men over her children. Mary said that her mom always wanted to be with a man, even if that meant leaving her 5 kids home to fend for themselves. Mary goes on to say that she felt completely unloved growing up and that it hurt her to her core. And now we all know why Mary Cosby is the way Mary Cosby is. Then Brittany snaps back at Mary and says, don't you ever bring up my kids. Never again. And then to camera, Brittany says, listen, anyone that mom shames should actually be ashamed of themselves. Then Bronwyn pipes up and says she'd actually like to hear something about Brittany that isn't unhinged. Brittany says, what? And Bronwyn says, listen, everything about you was chaotic as fuck. And you came into that party hot and wild. And at a certain point, all of these words matter. And you've got to get in the mix with what these words mean. You're going to need to get your words tight. Then Heather puts on her superhero cape and says, you know why I don't like you saying that? because you're the one that's going to need to get your words tight, because you're the one that's been telling everyone completely different things. Bronwyn, on our Wendy's trip, you were completely team Lisa. And then Angie says, well, everyone's entitled to have a change of heart. Bronwyn says she doesn't really understand where Heather's coming from because she's pretty sure that everyone agreed with her opinion. And she is, P.S., very surprised that Lisa Barlow did not stand up for her. Then Lisa says to Whitney, you're a shitty friend. You're a shitty friend. You take things out on me that have nothing to do with me. And then Whitney apologizes, but not to Meredith, who still is really looking for an apology. Whitney then says, I love everyone at this table, and I would really love everyone to come and join me at Trixie's drag show in Milwaukee. Meredith says, I'm not sure I'll be going. I'll think about it. And then to Camera, she says, it's not that I don't want to go to Milwaukee in winter. It's because I don't want to go with Whitney. Next stop, Milwaukee, everybody. I'm kind of liking this cast. I'm very excited about where Salt Lake City is going. And I don't mean to Milwaukee. Anyway, you guys, I've loved spending this time with you. I hope you have too. If you've been watching us on YouTube, please make sure you reach out and smash that subscribe button. If you've been listening on your favorite streaming platform, please make sure you give us a follow, give us a 5-star rating. We would love that. Leave a message, tell your family, tell your friends. If you'd like to reach me on socials, you can reach me on TikTok at This Is Generally Speaking, or on Instagram at The Jennifer Snook. If you would like to submit a question you'd like answered on the pod, or you'd like to collaborate, you can email me at jennifer@jennifersnook.com. And if you want to get your hands on any of this cute Generally Speaking merch that says Stay Rooted in Love on the back, I will leave the link below in the description. Okay, you guys, it's been a blast. I hope you have a wonderful week. And until we are together again, everybody, stay rooted in love. Love you guys. See you next time.